So, before you dismiss something as boring or irrelevant, remember, if you truly want to understand the present or yourself, you must begin in the past. You see, history is not simply the study of the past, it is an explanation of the present.
It's August, at least while I'm writing this, but watching the Holdovers brings me right back to December, right back to decorating the Christmas tree, right back to awkward holiday parties, right back to the trauma and regret you carry with you around these times. In all seriousness, the Holdovers is a great movie. It's nostalgic, even for a time period that I've never experienced. A big part of the joy that I get from this movie is the great characters that we follow for the ride. This is thanks to the great acting from Paul Giamatti, Dominic Sessa, and Divine Joy Randolph, all bringing their respective characters to life. Something I've noticed on rewatch is the amount of melancholy that's found throughout this film. I would always describe this movie as warm and heartfelt, even though for most of the runtime it takes place during a snowy November with characters that spend most of the runtime hating each other. It's stunning to see them balance emotions and feelings in this movie that should contrast each other but end up mixing really well. So let's review the trauma and regret in The Holdovers. Just a quick summary, since The Holdovers has grown a reputation for being a welcome addition to people's holiday binge and while it's still summer. Paul Giamatti plays hated boarding school teacher Paul Hunnam, who gets stuck holding over the holidays with Angus Tully, played by Dominic Sessa, and joining them is Mary Lamb, played by the amazing Divine Joy Randolph. They hate each other at first, but learn to get along through shenanigans. And between Mary and Paul, a lot of alcohol.
Are you kidding me? It's only 11 and he's already lit.
But also something that holds the group together and is a big theme of the movie that we'll be focusing on is the trauma and regret that these characters have struggled with throughout their whole lives. At first we're led to believe that these people have nothing in common. However, throughout the movie it's revealed that these people struggle and relate to the same issues and problems. Paul and Angus share trauma about their relationships with their fathers, which leads to one of the most heartfelt conversations from the movie.
You're not your father.
How do you know?
Because no one is his own father. I'm not my dad, no matter how hard he tried to beat that idea into me.
Mary and Angus share a lot in common about the loss of family, Mary having lost her son Curtis while he was in the army, and Angus losing his father to mental health, which he lies about him physically being dead.
Oh, no, I was praying to the God I don't even believe in that your mother would pick up the phone or your father would arrive in a helicopter or a submarine or a flying fucking saucer to take you
dead.
Mary and Paul on rewatch I'd argue are the most different from each other. However, their scenes together are spectacular, both having shared more life than Angus. The scene of them just watching the dating show and simply just talking is one of my favorites from the whole movie.
I took this job when Curtis was small because I wanted to ensure that he was going to have a good education. You know, he flourished here.
Yes. No, he was a great kid. I had him one semester. Very insightful.
He hated you.
One thing I did want to bring up is the abandonment that Paul and Mary contrast each other from. When Paul asks Mary why she's holding over, she gives the very depressing answer of,
Like Curtis will think that I'm abandoning him, you know? This is the last place that my baby and I were together.
But later in the movie, we learn Paul left his father's house at 15, in a sense abandoning him, although to very different circumstances. Now that I think about it, Paul mentions the death of his mother that happened at a very young age for him, and it's really easy to miss because it's not brought up throughout the movie much. But the theme of death flows very heavily throughout this film, death being a big part of the trauma for these characters. I suppose the death of Paul's mother is in the subtext, or Paul's fear of women, as Angus puts it.
No wonder you're afraid of women.
And the story he gave when he almost married, but then claiming,
And?
We came to our senses. This is not exactly a face forged for romance, Mary.
it's clearly something that affects Paul. We're just not given an intimate scene of him talking about it, which I actually believe services the movie better. The character who I believe ties this movie together is Mary, giving us a perspective of a grieving mother, opposed to Angus and Paul, who have lost, or at least have the feeling of losing a parent. Mary's character is just so tragic, I mean, having her husband pass away before the birth of her son and taking up a job as a cook in a cafeteria just for the opportunity to give her son a good education.
They were good men. Both of them. And neither of them made it to 25. My baby wasn't even 20.
It can be something that none of us have experienced, but the writing and acting just makes us feel for Mary, which is why it's so satisfying when Paul says,
But I guess no matter how bad a cook she is, now they can never fire her.
Will you shut up?
throughout the whole movie we see Mary's trauma with the pain of losing her son, which climaxes at the Artie Shaw scene.
You know, we used to dance to this. What teenage kid you know listens to Artie Shaw?
You're killing me. Can't you play something a little hipper?
Don't touch that goddamn record.
This causes the group to have to leave after her breakdown, which makes Angus say,
Would you give me a break? God, I was hitting it off with Elise.
Oh, God. The niece? Are you kidding me? This poor woman is bereft, and all you can think about is some silly girl.
sound familiar?
You're gonna get me fired. You!
The one that might lose an arm, and all you can think about is yourself.
That's something I think this movie just does brilliantly, which is foreshadowing. It could be something that's a key part to the plot, such as Paul thinking Lydia is flirting with him, or his burning hate for his students, which turns out for Paul to be oh so wrong, and turns out for Paul to more just be projecting his past failure and regret.
You hit him? What, like punched him out?
Nope, I hit him with a car.
But the foreshadowing could also be very subtle, such as Angus seeing the snow globe in the party and recalling the time he went to go see a Picasso painting with his father, or Paul stealing the alcohol his boss got gifted after they got called out for visiting Angus's father in Boston. Boston does bring a very sour-sweet end to Mary's arc, with her visiting her pregnant sister, and gifting, I guess would be the right word, Curtis's baby close to them. It's tragic yet beautiful, which I feel describes this movie very well. Although this movie could be very bleak with the subject matter it discusses, it's very cozy and relaxed with the tone, pacing, and set design. These dark moments of trauma and regret are more seen in pockets of conversation and moments of intimacy. Most of this movie feels like opening presents on Christmas Day, and the humor brings a great balance to everything. The final thing I want to discuss about this movie comes at the very end, when Angus tells Paul about the pain he feels from feeling that his mother stashes him away in boarding school.
It's easy to just stash me away in boarding school. Like half of us are just stashed away there. I get it. She never has to look at me.
Which is a great callback to earlier when he tells Kuntz,
I mean, if I were your parents, I'd never want you home again. The only tool in your room is you.
This confirms that Angus was projecting his feelings, which goes hand in hand with Paul's feelings towards his students. We learned that Paul got kicked out of college for being accused of plagiarism from a well-off roommate, similar to the entitled students that he teaches.
That blue-blooded prick's family had allies on the faculty. I mean, their last name is on a library, for Christ's sakes.
We learned that he then stays teaching, putting out his anger on his students, believing them to be bratty and snotty. These three are able to find relatability and comfort about their trauma and regret through each other, and finding peace even though they spend Christmas, a time you should be with your family, with each other. This movie reminds me that struggle is how we relate to each other, and love is how we move on from that struggle, all put into one beautiful story with stunning direction. The Holdovers is one of the best movies of 2023, and has earned a spot in my holiday rewatch list, even in summer. Okay, that's all. Thank you. Watch more Christmas movies in August.